Well, hello, everybody. If you're watching live, welcome. If you're watching later, welcome. It's so good to have you on our Thursday live cast called Relationship Matters, named after the book that I wrote about relationships. Because I believe this everything flows out of relationship. And some of our greatest joys come from healthy relationships. Also, some of our greatest pain comes from unhealthy ones. And so we know that relationships affect every area of our life. And so it's worth the conversation. So every week we have a conversation with people, experts, because they've got training and expertise, like our today's guest, Dr. Wayne Hammond. And other times we just have people with lived experience and whatnot. And so I really hope you enjoy today because I am really excited to introduce to you Dr. Wayne Hammond. Wayne, Pat, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure to spend time with you and your audience. You're definitely talking about a topic dear to my heart.
Yeah. And I'm going to just read Dr. Wayne's bio right now, but then I'm going to just talk a few minutes about personally. He's been a good friend of mine. So Dr. Wayne Hammond is the founding partner of and CSO with Flourishing Life Technologies in Calgary, Alberta, and holds an adjunct status with Endorsed University in Calgary. Over the past 20 years, he has primarily worked with complex youth, adults, and their families with a focus on comrade, sexual acting out, substance abuse, and violent issues, as well as other related mental health concerns. He has served in a clinical supervisory capacities, worked in a comprehensive residential treatment center, and has provided clinical services in the inpatient, outpatient forensic setting, as well as the adolescence comorbidity program based in the hospital setting. He has established several or published several scientific articles and has been active lecturer with regards to various mental health concerns and the implications of resiliency, human flourishing, and strength-based practice for preparing individuals, organizations, and community culture to thrive. And I had met Dr. Wayne Hammond years ago when I was with Impact Society. Now, some of my regular watchers will remember my very first episode. I had Jack Toth on, who's a very dear friend, and he and I worked together developing the Heroes program. And Dr. Wayne Hammond examined the Heroes program to see why was it effective. And he's done an extensive study, and I believe, and I don't know if he disagrees or not, but I think he's the runner in strength-based approach. I think he's one of the Canada's gifts in this area and how it works and why it works. And so we're going to talk about that today. And but because of that work together, Dr. Wayne also was very kind and wrote a recommendation for my book. So it's published right in my book, his comments. And so I just really appreciate you so much, Wayne, and I really appreciate you being here today. And so let's jump into this. I really want to hear, I think the viewers need to hear, relationships are so complex. And we know from experience that, generationally, we pass on some of our, we pass on the good things, but we also pass on some of those problems. And I think we talk mostly today in the sense of family relationships, but also organizations. It comes in businesses. I mean, every place we have a relationship, we have a potential for relationship dysfunction.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could just start off by telling us what is the Flourishing Life Technologies, and why are you what are you up to these days, and then how does strength-based approach work?
Yeah, well, it's just want to thank you for the privilege of coming, maybe, and spending a bit of time talking at a more heart level. But as maybe people are kind of picking up, my background was in psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade, I guess, in training, and I was trained in that model that when people experience challenges relationally or mental health wise or whatever the case might be, that they have our natural response to that then is we're going to figure out what that is, what the problem is. We'll diagnose the problem, and then, we'll then create a response to that problem, and therefore you should be okay. And what I found in my practice is that people don't want to be fixed. They want to be valued. I think that kind of ties back to this whole idea is that we're human beings, and we're built for relationship, and how those relationships, whether it's a professional, a partner, neighbor, your children, the relationship you develop and how you develop that is probably one of the more critical components of what it means to find solutions or to experience healthy living.
Right.
It's fundamental. So in my practice, I was moving away from this idea of what's wrong with people to what's right with people.
Yes.
And I actually believe that everybody has what they need to navigate all their life challenges, or to build the types of relationships that they deserve in their life, and how they can nurture that. And so I was moving more to this idea of, can we actually understand what those protective factors, or what are those critical components that actually allow a person to sort of experience life in positive ways, or to navigate challenges in functional ways, or to experience that concept of happiness, that flourishing concept. And so my original work was really around resiliency. It was helping people to understand how to navigate and bounce back. But what I found is that there's 4 key concepts that I build into everything that I do. Is, how do we connect with people? Do we connect in ways where they feel valued, they feel safe, and they feel that something could be different for them? And so therefore, as I interact with people, if I don't inspire them to think about what could be, what's possible, and that it could be something that they could realize, then I haven't done them any favors. And then the next step is, how do I then support my relationships, not because I want them to be what I think they should be, but because I'm accepting them for who they are now. And I'm helping them to realize that they actually have the potential to do great things, and that I'm not there to force that on them. I'm there to come alongside and sort of be that support system they need to step out of their comfort zone and try new things. Because it's actually when we step out of our comfort zone that we actually learn. That's where we discover our potential. That's where we actually embrace sometimes those fears that we have and say, I know I ought to do this, but this is holding me back. What would it mean to step out and actually navigate that fear so that it doesn't hold you back? And then ultimately, my goal in relationship is, do people feel empowered? They feel like, hey, I am of worth. I am of value. I know how to create success. And so therefore, irrespective of what's going on in my life, I'm okay. I'm good with who I am, because I learned that from my relationship with Wayne, or I learned that from my relationship with Mark. They help me to realize that I am a person of value. I am a person of potential, and I have control in my life. But it's not because I'm an island unto myself. It's because I have these unique relationships around me, my sense of community. And the research is really clear. Whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, if you have significant positive relationships in your life, even just one, 95% chance of just doing well in life.
Yeah, I believe that. I see it every day. So I believe it. But I love what you said there. I want to really highlight it. People don't want to be fixed. They want to be valued.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, what a statement. And I would say the same for children. Don't want to be fixed. They want to be valued. Teenagers don't want to be fixed. They want to be valued. And so much of our discipline approach is, as I remember you call it, is that deficit model, where we see that there's a problem and it's got to be fixed. And I love that we got to start seeing what's strong, not what's wrong.
Right.
And so I love that you're teaching. You're teaching, Dr. Hammond, actually like changed my life. It really did. Even though we were working together with the Heroes program and finding out why it was working, and the discovery was that it was that strength-based approach. But you're teaching on strength-based. I mean, it's throughout my book. I teach all the time. I'm always doing workshops, and it's in everything now. It's in my heart, so it comes out everywhere. And so I thank you for that. So now in these relationships, so let's look at a bit. If there is a struggle, if you're having struggle relating to a spouse, child, critical people in your life, what are some of the ways that a strength-based approach can shift that for you?
Yeah. Well, oftentimes when we experience challenges in relationships, our natural tendency is to try to manage that challenge.
Right.
And anytime you start to try to manage people, their natural tendency is to push back or do more of actually what you're trying to invite differently,
Right.
especially with children.
Yeah.
If you're trying to manage your child's behavior, you've lost.
Yeah.
Uh, because they've got more energy, they got more creativity, and they'll take it on as a challenge.
Yeah.
What I invite people is to listen to learn, ask good questions.
Mm,
Uh, you know, I thought we discussed this the other day, and we were thinking of this, but you made a choice today, and it's an interesting choice because I would never have thought of that. Why was it important to you?
right.
The first one's judgment. I'm putting you down because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. The
Yeah.
second one is curiosity. It's about
Right.
maybe there's something going on in that person or that child that's an emotion they don't know how to deal with. They're
Right.
frustrated, they're angry, they're feeling whatever. And the natural tendency for people is to try to cope, but they may not know what all their options are, or they may not even know what could be a functional way to navigate that feeling. And that's the invitation that comes up is so therefore, if we understand what the emotion is, for example, if a child's angry with their parent, that anger causes them to go into defense mode.
Right.
It's a bit of that biology part. It's that lizard part of the brain. When children are scanning their environment and they feel like something is hurting them, they actually scan their environment 4 to 5 times every second looking for a threat. Your brain
Mm,
is designed to survive, not thrive. And
right.
so by trying to manage the behavior, then the child sees that as you're not listening to me. You're not paying attention to what's really going on inside of me. You just want me to behave a certain way, therefore you'll accept me. And that's the challenge we get into as parents. So, how do you listen to the emotion and identify that? Because if you can help a child move from anger to a sense of being soothed or happy, it
Right.
actually creates the opening to have a conversation. Because when a child's angry, they can't communicate with you. But
Right.
if a child says, "Hey, you're listening to me," you actually create what we call endorphins, which actually opens up the amygdala to the limbic system of the brain, which is where we have our feelings. Oh, I feel this, and this is what I did, or that hurt me, but that's what was causing it. That's where the child can actually start processing things. And then they start to look at, well, if I do this and this and this, I can go from angry to happy. Now
Yeah.
I have a strategy. So I'm always inviting parents, listen to the emotion, help to the child to realize, hey, I'm listening to you. I get it. You're hurt. What would it look like for you to feel happy? All of a
Right.
sudden, the child is in a position now to be receptive because you've asked them, what does change
Yeah.
going to look like? How are
Right.
we going to navigate this? And I'm going to support you to get there. And then when they do feel happy, to thank the child and say, good work. Awesome. Good for you.
Right.
When you did this, this, and this, you navigated that challenge and became happy. By children don't learn by osmosis. They learn when parents very specifically point out when you calmed down, when you took a time out, when you thought about it, you wrote down what you wanted me to do, we were able to get to that position. So
Right.
good for you.
Yeah.
That's
So a byproduct is that we're teaching our kids how to make good decisions
right,
rather than making decisions for them. We're trying to manage
right.
them.
Yeah,
So
and
powerful.
and by doing that, then the child says, "Oh, now I know how to make my mom happy. Now I know how to make my dad happy." They have a
Right.
strategy. They can repeat that. And what's really amazing is when parents or even in couple relationships or whatever, take
Mhm.
the time when you notice somebody that you care about doing something that you think is amazing, point it out to them and
Yeah.
say, "Thanks for doing that. That's why I'm your friend. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing that. That's what it means to be a member of our family. Thanks.
Right.
That's what my kid, who I'm so proud of, does."
Right.
And the natural tendency inside of everybody is, "Hey, you're paying attention to me. You've noticed me doing something right, what I'm good at, and you're saying that that's what you're looking for. Okay, I'm now starting to get a sense of how I can relate to you,
Right.
how you and I can, work through these challenging times. But you're giving them a template for life,
Yeah.
and that's I don't need to go too deep on the brain science, but it is all about
Well,
home.
but the brain science is important, Dr. Hammond, because if we understand the brain science, then we can understand why it will work. I sometimes I talk about this stuff and I get pushback from parents and saying, "Yeah, but like it's unmanageable," or they're like, they don't respond to me. Well, but if you understand the brain science of a strength-based approach, you're going to start to see why it works. Like
Sure.
what you explained, if they can associate an outcome with
Yeah.
why they're feeling the way they are, the cause and effect, we're
Yeah.
actually empowering them. We're
Yeah.
empowering their children to make better decisions. And I've
Sure.
always said that they'll get attention the way you've taught them to get attention. So
Sure.
if they only get attention through negative behavior,
Yeah.
that's what you taught them.
Yeah.
If they get
Yeah.
attention through positive behavior, it meant you caught them doing good things, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 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 Kids want relationship, but it's up to the adults in that relationship to determine how that gets expressed.
Right.
And you're right. So when you actually create that, hey, you're listening to me, you're responding to me, you're creating a safe place for me to talk to you about my whatever it is or express. You create what they call an oxytocin, which is the heart hormone. It's probably the
Right.
most powerful hormone that we have in our system,
Right.
and that's that dedication or that feeling that kids get to say, I really like my mom and dad. And if I'm faced with choices out there, I will side with situations that honor my mom and dad, not my peers or everything else.
Right.
If you want your kids to navigate life through their teenage years, oxytocin is the hormone you need to learn to create in your children, because that creates a very deep-seated dedication to to that relationship. They want to
Right.
honor it, and they don't want to hurt it in any way.
Yeah. So
And so
give us some other ways that you can create that and release that into your kid's brain.
yeah, like I think in a lot of cases, that it's usually accumulation of smaller things. It's not just
Yeah. Right.
so I think it's really important that parents create rituals with their kids, so that child knows that nothing else is going to interfere it, and I get to spend quality time with my mom or my dad
Right.
every Friday night between 6 and 8.
Right.
Kids look for that. They want that. And it's not that it has to be activity driven all the time. It could be as simple as going to a coffee shop or going to a place and just being in each other's presence.
So
But
that would also work then for a spouse, or it would
absolutely.
also work for, like, if you're a leader in an organization, it would
Yep.
work if you wanted to raise up leaders. That would be a
Yep.
great way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very specifically, they know that I've got your time, your attention, and I get to
Right.
talk about whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful message to that person, that you value them, you want to spend time with them, and you enjoy being in their presence.
Wow. So powerful.
Yeah,
And that produces the oxytocin in the brain. That's what
yeah,
produces it. That sense of connection, that sense of value.
yeah. There's a number of other hormones that created along with it
Yeah.
but it's a positive feeling. I mean, that's the end result of it.
Yeah.
And so people like that. And the more the more they experience it, the more dedicated they are to replicating that.
Right.
But you've also taught them some amazing skills, how they can have relationship with other people, because
Yeah.
you're mentoring that to them, you're role modeling it to them.
Right.
So, and it's going to come into some of your future conversations when your children or your partner saying, hey, I'm not comfortable with how I'm feeling right now. Well, you've earned the right to sort of say, what would it look like for you not to feel that way? What would it look like if I had to change something that I could create a sense of safety for you or a sense of feeling better? You've earned the right to have those conversations.
Right.
If you're only having those conversations when the car hit the wall, like it's in crisis mode, nobody will be listening to you,
Right.
because they're in pain, and you can't create a positive hormone when a person is stressed out and their body is into fight, flight, freeze.
Right.
It's just not possible.
That makes total sense. Makes total sense. So the first step I'm hearing then is that we need to, in building healthy relationships and in overcoming some of these things, is that connection is really important. But
it's creating that safe place where a person feels valued and you build trust.
Right.
That's the starting point.
Yeah. So then what's next? What can somebody do to go to the next level then?
Yeah, I refer to it as inspiring. At that point, when you see things, instead of condemning it, reframe it.
Yeah.
Talk
about that. I like that.
You might have a child that does something that was contrary to maybe the family expectation. And what I want to look at is, it sounds like you were nervous and you felt you needed to take control, I think that's amazing. Maybe we need to talk about how you could do that. So
Right.
the first
Yeah.
one is saying, I recognize your feeling, and you actually were wanting to do something about it, and that's what I expect from you. But it sounds like you may have not known all your options.
Right.
So let's explore those. Let's play with that. And that gets into a little bit of Carol Dweck's work around the idea that when kids are, or anybody, we have a tendency to want to stay in our comfort zone, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is we want to give people permission to step out of their comfort zone, try things, make a mistake, learn from it, because all learning is based on what the mistakes we make, not
Yeah.
repeating things we already know. And
Right.
that's what actually writes the new neural pathways that then create a new way of thinking for children, a new way of thinking in relationships that, something, I don't have to be perfect with this person, or I don't have to be always,
Yeah.
because they accept me, and they just have this amazing way of helping me to gain insight when I fall down. They help me to get
Yeah.
back up and try something differently. And so that's that inspire reframing
Right.
concept.
Right.
Is it's instilling hope in people when they know, because you don't have to tell a person they messed up. They know that already. Even a little
Yeah.
kid does that. And by emphasizing it may
Yeah.
gives you more pleasure than anybody else, not the child.
Yeah.
So I stay away from that. There's a natural tendency in us to lord that over people. And what
Mhm.
I'm inviting people is, okay, we know the mistake was made or the behavior wasn't appropriate. What I want to do is I want to reframe it so that the child or the person that I'm interacting with knows maybe another option to try that we could both support. And
Yeah.
and another way to reframe things too is let your kids know when you messed up,
Yeah.
because you're giving them an example of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
I if I'm not apologizing to my two boys 2 or 3 times a week, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
I
I,
always
I
teach.
I often say that one of the redeeming factors of my parenting, when I was still in my addiction and when I was still in my healing journey, was that fact. I was always able to just tell him, "Hey, Dad messed up there,
Yeah, yeah,
and I shouldn't have done that." I think it's really important to take responsibility and model
absolutely.
that.
Yep.
I quote you. I teach an anger management class, and I quote you in it quite often. And that is when you said, like, people do the best they can with what they know. I can't remember the exact
Yeah.
quote, but it's
With what
basically
they've learned to date. Yeah.
yeah, what they know today, they're doing the best they can to cope or to
Yeah,
get
exactly.
through this issue. So start there with somebody if you want to see change on that. I always tell people you have to teach people how to love you. So if you want to, that's where you start to understand and believe that they're doing the best they can with what they have. But
Yeah.
maybe you have another idea that could be introduced, but you got to earn the right to speak that in.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that why relationship is so important, because you can't have those conversations unless the child knows that you actually love them, that you enjoy. So sometimes when my kids mess up, my first point is I can point out the mistake real quick. But my first comment is, something, son, you just need to know that I love you and I think you're the most amazing kid around.
Yeah,
And not to kind of blow smoke at them, but rather they
yeah.
need to know that I'm not
Truly
there
believe
because
it. Yeah,
I'm there because I'm concerned. And you know, and sometimes kids don't know how to handle that.
yeah.
And so they will up the ante sometimes. They'll
Right,
move to unhealthy behaviors or whatever the case might be. And
right,
I just refer to that as the hand grenade period, because
right,
they're doing it because you've offered an invitation and they're going to test you.
right.
You really mean what you say.
And if they're testing you, they're listening to you.
Exactly.
That's good.
But you need
That's
to
good.
recognize that they are testing you, and therefore you need to be consistent on how you approach them.
Yeah. So
Because
one of our viewers, a friend of mine, John, he said to the child, "What can I do to sorry, what can I do to get you to that place?" So that's a great
Mm,
question to ask. How can I help you get to that place? But then he asked a question: what if the response is something unhealthy? Like what if the child's response is unhealthy? What's the next step?
yeah, yeah, it depends. Like, I mean, if we're talking about risk behavior, like
Yeah.
substance or mental health issues or whatever, then I think sometimes it's important that parents recognize when they need to add help to the picture. Not that they step out of the picture, but it's more of a support. But
Right.
one thing I'm always cautious about when I'm talking to people or children around how I can support them, is I'll ask a question that's more like, what would it look like
Right.
for you to feel this way?
Right.
What would need to change? Now, I'm asking them to kind of think about their circumstances, and I'm not saying that they need to do it or I need to do it, but I want to know, hey, from your perspective,
Right.
what would it take for you to feel? And are there times when you do feel that way? What's going on? That because then you're going from the known to the unknown. If
Right.
you ask a child to fix a problem, they don't know how to do it.
Right.
And
And
so
then
I'll always say,
they feel more frustrated then, right?
right. So I'll ask questions like, I noticed last week that you seemed to be pretty excited about something. It sounds like you were happy. What was going on that allowed you to feel that?
Right.
And can we create a way to replicate that? Or what was it that you were using there that we could bring to this and that I could support you with? So
Yes.
kids only respond, as I said, from what they've learned to date. And sometimes they're actually doing positive things. They just don't understand it.
Right.
So I remember, I'm not sure if I have time on this, but I had one kid that I was working with, and he was stealing cars. He was right on the top list of the police department and he was sent to me, and they said, Wayne, fix him or we're locking him up. He's turning 14. We can throw him into youth justice. And
Yeah.
his chances of survival there is probably less than 80%. When I met with the child, my first conversation first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come and talk to me, because my understanding is you've got an amazing story and I'd love to hear it.
Right.
Could you tell me a little bit about what puts a smile on your face? What do you do? What do you get excited about? I didn't come in and say, oh, by the way, you were sent here. I need to change you. And if you don't change, you're going.
Yeah.
So I was about connecting. And then as I was listening to the story, he was how he stole cars and who he was working with and all that kind of stuff. And I said, there's two things I'm learning from you. One is you've got a passion for cars. And the other is, it sounds like you want people in your life that actually care about you. But it sounds like you don't have a lot of good options. So what would it look like for us to change that?
Wow.
And so when I went to the court system for him, I told the judge, I said, you can send him this way and you're not going to have a lot of success. Would you try something? So I got him court ordered to work in an auto mechanic shop with a guy that was a mentor.
Yeah.
And now he's a head mechanic in a dealership. So when you're listening to the story of kids, make sure that you're paying attention to what's the need that they're trying to fill.
Right.
That's normal. Everybody needs to feel safety. Everybody needs to feel like they belong to something. Everybody wants to be part of something bigger than who they are. So figure out the need, because then if you can meet the need, then all of a sudden you've opened the door for behavior. So connect the emotion, change the thinking, the behavior follows.
Right.
You don't have to manage the behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I teach that quite often, that we tend, even in couple relationships, we tend to fight or battle or conflict over behavior without understanding the cause, which is the feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think it's you that teaches there's a feeling, then there's a thought, then there's a behavior. Right. And people will push back on me and say, oh, no, your feelings are first, or your thoughts are first. No. Your emotion, it might present as a thought, but it's not honest.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand the feeling of the person and understand what's making them tick or what's making them feel the way they are.
Right.
Then you can explore change of thought, and you change your thinking, you change your life, right? And so I really like that.
And it is. Yeah, like I mean, a simple example of his anxiety. So the body is sensing that something's out there that is a threat. So that creates the feeling.
Right.
The reaction to that is that your thoughts start to say, yeah, there is something out there that's scary. Well, then that triggers the body into its fight, flight, freeze. Right. So it's always feeling, thought, behavior. It's just that
because our bodies aren't designed to hold on to stress, right? Or anxiety. Right. It's got to displace it somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if a child is feeling threatened or anxious or whatever, that amygdala goes into gear for the next 6 hours. Right. You have no way of connecting with that child at a verbal level and an emotional level. You're best to kind of put things on hold and then reconnect when things have calmed down.
That's a really, could you say that again? How long is it? How long
It's
should
a
you leave it?
4 to 6 hours when a child's
Wow.
amygdala gets triggered and they move into react mode.
Yeah. That's a really good, there's a great awareness, audience. That's a great awareness. If you're in a battle, would that be the same for adults? Would that be the same if you had a conflict with somebody at work
Yeah,
or a spouse? So you kind of want to wait 4 to 6 hours to deal with it rather than trying to deal with it, because I you start climbing the anger ladder if you try to
right.
deal with it when they're still in
Yeah.
fight or flight mode.
Yeah, and especially for guys, we have a tendency to want to solve problems immediately, right?
Yeah.
Women maybe have a little bit more of a perspective that I'm just not quite sure I want to be in your presence right now. So it's more of an idea of like, hey, I know something's happened here, not quite sure what's going on. Could we connect here for lunch and talk through
Right.
this? Although I have met people, it's amazing how people hang on to things, right? Even with my wife, something I did 20 years ago will still
Yeah.
come up in conversations. So,
Right.
you just got to learn to say, hey, something. Uh,
Well, and probably they were triggered on a given
sure,
day. It may not have anything to
absolutely.
do with what happened that day, but it was
Yeah,
triggered and it reminded activated. And so
yeah,
now
yeah,
they're thinking about your offense from 10 years ago or 20
yeah.
years ago. Yeah.
But it's like if people can kind of get their head around this concept, is that I believe everybody has a story, and your
Right.
life experiences nurtures that story of your perception of yourself, your understanding of the world around you. It's kind of the mindset that I
Yes.
talk about in my work, and and uh, and so when you're interacting with people, it's not about trying to change that story. It's about nurturing the story forward in a way that it's meaningful to the person that you're connecting with.
Mm,
If it's
yes.
meaningful to them, they'll adopt it and it becomes part of their persona of how they see themselves and how they want to in the world. But if you're coming along and saying, I think your story should look at this like this, you have done a grave injustice to them,
Right.
because it's not your story. You don't have to live it.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I work with children or adults or whatever, I just say, I have this opportunity to be part of your chapters 3 or even 4, but you
Right.
have to write 5, 6, 7, and 8. So how have I interacted with you that's given you that sense of confidence, that sense of empowerment, that your
Right.
story is going to be about realizing your greatest potential?
Wow.
That's the focus of it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and it starts with listening to that story, like you said,
Yeah,
listen to understand, and when you do that, you earn the right to speak into the story or become part of it,
absolutely. Yeah.
become part of the story, and that might be even a question we want to ask, right? Like, how do you see me intersecting your story?
Mm,
How, what do you need from me to make your story,
yeah.
shift that to a better place for you?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to tell them. I really like that. We're not designed to be fixed. We're
Yeah.
designed to be valued and healed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's
Yeah. So in your flourishing work, you actually created a strength based parenting PDF that really has some excellent things in it, and so we're going to make that available to everybody. If you want that, I'm going to put at the end. Stick around to the end, and I'm going to actually make that give you Wayne's email so that you can actually send him an email, and he'll send you that PDF free of charge. It's a excellent document, uh, and multiple pages long, and it's just some really good. A lot of the things he's saying here, but in a concise list, and so that can really be of help. Um, Wayne, what else? What's the next step? So you've established this connection, you've listened to understand, you've asked questions, you've taken the curiosity. I really like that. Take a curiosity position rather than a judgment one.
mhm.
Now you're kind of starting to see the people around you, your team or your family, starting to make good decisions, and that starting to go. When things start getting good, we tend to get complacent. We kind of back off. So, is there a proactive way that we can make sure we're intentional?
Mhm. Yeah, like a so this is that third step, the build part.
Okay,
And we want people to learn the art that life is a continuous process of making mistakes, getting back up, and going forward.
right,
So what I learned yesterday by making mistakes, I use today to create success. But by stepping out of my comfort zone and making mistakes, I learn new things about myself that I need for tomorrow. And
Right.
it's that repetition that we go through. So if I'm working in relationships, you know, I, whether it's at work or whatever the case might be, it's about creating an environment and a culture and a relationship of safety that people have permission to step out of their comfort zone and try things, be innovative, be creative.
Right.
That kind of. When I'm working with children, like with my two boys, I always told them, my job is not to make your life easy. My job is to mess it up. Because if life is too easy for you, you're not going to be prepared for the real world. Because the real world will not treat you with kid gloves. They're not going to pick you up when you fall down off your bike. They're
Right.
going to run over you. And so I've always kind of told my two boys that if I ask you on Friday, how's your week gone? I'm not looking for it. Well, it was okay, Dad, and everything's good. What I want to hear from them is I tried 3 or 4 different things this week and I got one success. So
Right.
yeah, I want them stepping out. And that really ties back to the brain again, the brain research. So this is Carol Dweck's work of growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Right.
We can raise a generation of people, and even as adults, who think that their life is fixed, that they have no control over it. And so therefore they tend to be defensive and very protective. Or you can create a growth mindset, which says, with effort, persistence, and resilience, I can become more intelligent. I can develop my giftings. I can do things I never thought I could do yesterday. And that's what I'm inviting in relationships, is that if you're partnering with somebody or if you're at work, create a culture is about people stepping out of their comfort zones and realizing, aha, I didn't think I could do that, but I can. And this is what I do.
Right.
And I'm sharing it with everybody else. So again, it's it is a and that when you see those types of environments and types of relationships, they're more like an adventure as opposed to a role.
Yeah, it makes it kind of interesting, doesn't it?
Exactly. Because you could go to work and say, something, we normally kind of do this, but today we did this.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's about, I'm looking forward to going to work because I like being around my colleagues. They come and high five me when they see me doing amazing things, and I high five them.
Yeah.
So mutually encouraging each other. And when we make a mistake, we celebrate it. But when we do a small success, we're celebrating that as well.
Yes.
And we have realistic expectations that actual learning is always a sequence of small steps.
Right.
What are those milestones?
It's always has a failing forward component to it.
Absolutely.
If you failed, you're not a failure. You failed so you can learn how not to fail next time. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's so good, Wayne, because even in a family setting, that's why, we hear the statement often, we want to create memories with our children. Well, going camping or, to Disneyland or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, what's the purpose of creating those memories if it's not for connection, for trying new things, for, I remember, my granddaughter is 4.5. And when she was like 18 months, she was fearless. She'd just go down every slide, didn't matter, it would always be beyond her age. She was trying to climb things.
Right.
And then, I think some of us in her life got a little worried about it. She, and we started to kind of say, oh, careful, or whatever. And then all of a sudden she didn't want to go on slides anymore.
Right.
And we didn't understand why. But when you take the risk away, you kind of take the learning away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've done a real injustice to our children.
Yeah.
That's
part of the problem with institutionalizing school and all these things, right?
Yeah, like a really simple example of is this idea of safe playgrounds. You go and see the monkey bars and and they got this sponge on the ground. If a child ever falls off, they're going to bounce. Well, that wasn't the way I grew up. I was climbing in a tree, and I had to make decisions of, should I go to that next branch? Will it hold my weight? Is that something I can actually accomplish? So in that process, I was actually learning amazing things.
Right.
Whereas if you're in a safe playground, it's kind of like, oh, I get excited, I can go up the bar, but I have no sense of risk taking. I have no sense of actually, what is it? Critical thinking, the pros and cons. Should I make that decision or not?
Right.
Because whatever happens, I'm safe. Well,
do you think participation ribbons have affected that as well? Like taking away trophies or winners and losers, and like I don't think we need to I think we needed to reframe the loser part, but by taking away healthy competition.
Yeah.
Do you think that that has affected that risk taking as well in this generation?
Well, yeah, I think there's like I look at it more this way is that we should always inspire excellence. So
Right,
whether it's in sports or academics, but it could be in character. It
right,
could be like we just, as a system, we tend to value certain things more than others.
right.
And so, what about the young kid that goes to school and he's the one who reaches out to the new student and makes them their friend? That to me is excellence. That's character. That's,
Right.
and so at the end of the year, we have these rituals of, honor students or best athlete. I think they should throw in 15 other ones,
Right.
best communicator, best empathy person, best, like whatever it is. But I
Yeah.
think what we wanted to say to kids is every one of you is important to the success of the school. And
Wow.
we need you all. We want you
Yeah.
to all step up and do what that gift you've got planted inside of you, because without it, we won't be as good as a school as we should.
Right.
So we should be celebrating excellence, kids stepping out and expressing their giftings or their passions or their sparks
Yeah.
that are on there. And if we would do more of that, we would actually help our children, because when children start to understand their spark or what they're good at,
Yeah.
that oftentimes lends insight to the career path or the
Right.
type of relationships that they bring into their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
For
we
sure.
need to do more of that. And Bennett with the Search Institute, before he passed away, he wrote a book called Sparks. And he talked about in the research that when kids understand their sparks, for 70% of them, that will become their career.
Wow.
So when you're raising your children, don't be thinking in terms of A plus, go on to university, become a doctor. That may not be their spark.
Right.
Give them permission to find out what their sparks are. What kind of
Right.
puts a smile on their face?
Yeah.
And then guide them into activities where they can explore
Right.
options around that.
Yeah.
Then they go to school and they're motivated. Oh, I got to get a degree in order to be a
Yeah.
dancer. Right on. So I'm
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. In my book, I talked about that with my son. He thought he was going to play in the NHL as a goalie, and I never told him he wasn't going to. I wanted
Right.
him, because that was his spark at the time.
Sure.
But his practice, his
Yeah.
discipline, the teamwork, everything he learned in that process, he's now applied to his life. He's now 38, and
Yeah.
he's applying it. The other thing he loved was music, and so he wanted to play in bands and travel, and I never said he couldn't.
Yeah.
And eventually it came to the place where he had to choose hockey or music. He chose music. Now he's a top music teacher
Yeah.
in our city, and he loves it. He loves pouring into those kids. He loves whatever. But it was because we allowed him to follow his spark in his
Right.
life. And I really believe, Wayne, you've tapped into something there that is really important. I think the more we tell kids that they can't do something,
Right.
we're doing them an injustice. We're in whatever. Let them try it. The other thing I really wanted to highlight that you said was, why don't we expect excellence?
Mhm.
I think, even in the workplace, and if you're a leader, a parent, even from, I expect my wife to expect excellence from me. Why
Sure.
would I not want to be excellent? Well, the reason I think sometimes is people think excellence means perfection,
Right.
and it doesn't. That those two things are far apart. It's not perfection. My definition of excellence is doing the best you can with
Right.
what you have. What do
Mhm.
you think about, like, how give us some tools? How can we expect excellence without putting expectation of weighted expectation on a child or
Yeah.
on a
Well,
team
I
member?
think it ties to what you were saying. It's an attitude, right? Um,
Right,
so when I talk to my boys about, like, I'm not expecting you to be perfect, but I expect that whatever you do, you're committed to it.
right,
You give it all you can, and don't be taking shortcuts.
right,
I'm dropping out early or whatever. No, if you're committed to it, you go the full distance.
right,
Um, and but the thing that we as parents or in relationships or things, we sometimes have an expectation of what that behavior needs to look like in order for excellence
right,
to be demonstrated, and
right.
that's when you get into trouble.
That's the unhealthy expectation
Yeah.
that puts weights on. Right, right,
And then when we start demanding that, then the person gets frustrated because they actually don't know how to get there.
right,
They haven't experienced it yet. Um, And then all of a sudden they feel like, well, I'm under a microscope around here.
Right.
You're saying I need to be excellent, but you're going to judge me every step of the way.
Right, because that puts too much pressure. I think sometimes we as parents live vicariously through our kids
Oh,
because we
sure.
miss opportunities. And so when we do that, we're putting unrealistic expectations on them. With drums, for example, my son, I never had to tell him to practice.
Yeah.
I never had to force him. I know lots of families fight with their kids over practicing,
Yeah.
but I never had to tell him because that was his spark. He
Yeah.
loved it.
Absolutely.
I didn't have to convince him to, because I allowed him to spark. The other thing, I felt maybe you can address is accountability.
Mm,
Sometimes we hold people accountable to what our expectations are or what we want, or because it made us look bad.
yeah.
Where I believe true accountability is where you hold them accountable what they say they want.
Right. And you can have some mutual discussions on that. Like, I think
Right,
sometimes when you were working with children or anybody, it's okay to have, so what would it look like for you to know that this was successful? And I'm going to tell you what I think it's going to look like in order to be successful. And
right,
let's find a middle ground that we both agree upon. So it's not wrong to have expectations. It's just that if they're the only expectation or they're unrealistic, then you're going to
right,
get into trouble. So
right,
my kids will buy into that. So when they started driving is, when do you come home? And
right,
things like that. Well, my expectation is that I'd like you at least on weekdays to be home by a certain time. Weekends, that could be a little different. But I also know, what are you doing out on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning?
right,
Like, you know, I actually care about you. And oftentimes, silly things happen that time of night.
right,
So what is the middle ground that we can fall on here? Because you need to know that I'm not trying to make your life miserable. I also know that I have some life experience that you haven't had,
right,
and I'd like to bring that to the conversation.
right,
Uh, doesn't mean that that has to be the way it is, but we'll find a place where we're good. And if it doesn't happen, and if you don't live up to your side or I don't live up to my side, what's going to happen as a result of that?
right.
And so it's mutually agreed upon. There's no surprises.
Yeah. So then it's okay to negotiate with your children. I have
Oh,
parents,
absolutely.
tell me all the time, well, you don't negotiate with your kids, you're the parent. It's
Yeah.
like, well, parenting is, I often remind people the word discipline actually means in the Latin means disciple.
Yes.
And we're supposed to disciple our kids, which means we're training them up in
Right.
something. We're not punishing them. Discipline that's punishment actually doesn't help children. It doesn't actually even get what the results you want
Yeah.
because you're punishing them. You want to actually empower them, or I
Right.
call it power to rather than power over,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. I kind of use the concept coaching. And my job is to coach
Yeah.
my child through life.
Right.
Um, and yeah, that's because as a coach, you're saying I'm bringing some expertise to this, but you have to own it. Like, you can
Yeah.
try it. I'm going to try to make it meaningful to you.
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, you either own this or you don't.
Right.
And where you have to live with the natural consequences of that as well.
Yeah, I use the same example with my son. I often say, he was a goalie, and I could equip him. I could buy him the equipment. I could get him to practice. I could cheer him on. And on the way home, almost every time he asked me, "Hey, is there an angle I missed, or is there something I
Yeah.
could have done better?" And so I'm coaching him, saying, "Hey, yeah, if you just squared up a little bit, you probably would have got that save or whatever." And we had great discussions. It was my favorite times is when I
Mm,
was with my kids. Same thing with my daughter playing soccer. She'd hop in the car and say, "Hey, what did you think of that?" Or,
right.
"Do you have any tips?" But the one thing I couldn't do is go out and play the game for him.
Exactly.
I, I couldn't get on the ice and go do it.
Yeah.
First of all, he was way better than I ever would have been. But secondly, it's not my job. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes us parents are trying to guide our kids' life to the point where we're actually on the ice playing
Right.
instead of just empowering
Yeah.
them.
Well, I think a lot of parents really struggle because there's transitions we go through as parents.
Yes.
When our kids are born, they're very dependent on us. And up until about age 10, 11, they basically sort of, mom and dad know a lot, and they kind of see us as God with a small g. But and they're turned 10, 11, 12, 13, there's this amazing thing that goes on inside a child's brain. It's a flooding of the brain. It's a chemical that goes through the brain that actually rewires the whole brain. So
Wow.
they move away from what they learned from you to now sort of being in a position, who am I? What's my identity? That's why they have a tendency to reach out to their peers a little bit more.
Right.
and they're trying to figure out what's important to me, what's my sense of right and wrong, and concepts like that. And one of the things that parents find is that my child used to listen to me, now they're questioning me,
Right.
and they're not paying attention to the idea that this is an amazing gift that children go through, because this is where they develop their personality. This is
Right.
where they develop that story going forward that's unique to them, not yours.
Yeah.
And parents have to realize that, hey, they're dependent on me, and I teach them a lot of skills. Now I'm kind of moving to a stage where I need to be very curious and supportive, but then I moved more to a coaching model into
So
the
true.
16, 17, 18 range. Because if
So
your
true.
child is not demonstrating a lot of sort of called adult behavior or maturity or accountability by the time they're 18, mm, but a lot of kids don't develop it by then because they've never been invited into that journey.
Right. Isn't that interesting? You said something there that just is so profound. Often we see their act of identity discovery and independence, and learning how to make good decisions. We see it as defiance.
Right.
We see it as rebellion, and we react like that because maybe the behaviors kind of look like that. But boy, if we took the curiosity position, if we
Yeah.
put like, wow, I have an opportunity to learn something new myself from the
Yeah.
way my child is seeing the world, but
Yeah.
it also gives you insight into their heart. If we took
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
yeah, and if we could let go and say, you know what? In fact, I did such a good job when they were little that they're now exercising
Yeah.
independence and finding out their own decision
Yeah.
making. Because if
Yeah.
you didn't do that job, they may not be there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's, because culture changes, circumstances change. Relationships don't change, the need for relationship and how they get
Right.
expressed. But what our children are dealing with is very different than what we were raised with.
Yes.
And they have to adapt to that. They've got to figure this out. And so it's good to ask questions. When you see something happening, as you said, don't challenge it in a
Right.
sense, but rather say, hey, sounds like you're trying to figure that out for you. Let me
Right.
know how that's working out for you. You
Yeah.
know, and you know, I, you know, yeah, like I just try to have fun with my kids, because if it gets
Yeah.
too serious, then
Yeah.
it just goes the wrong way every
Well,
time.
you want to enjoy the relationship with them,
Yeah,
and there's different phases and stages, but you can enjoy each one if
yeah,
you adjust your expectations based on where they are at,
yeah,
because we are the adults after all. And I think that I enjoyed every phase of my kids' life. In the teen years, we had a blast.
yeah,
And we didn't have. I was nervous that they were going to turn out like I did.
yeah,
Because I rebelled hard, but it was because I rebelled under the pressure of that expectation and
right,
rules and regulations. I was never allowed to make my own decisions or think
yeah,
for myself, and so I rebelled against that. I wasn't rebelling necessarily at the time. I didn't know that, but looking back, I was rebelling against that concept
right,
rather than rebelling against the relationship of my parents.
yeah,
I loved my parents. I wanted love
sure,
from them. I wasn't rebelling against relationship. I was rebelling against dictatorship and
yeah,
rules like the yeah. And so I think that you've made such an important point today. um, Thank you so much. That was such a valued conversation. I really encourage people to go back and listen a couple of times. I think you gave enough tips in there and whatnot to actually change the culture and environment in your home. See,
yeah,
that's where my takeaway from your work, Dr. Hammond, is this: that your work, the strength based approach, the flourishing mindset, I believe can actually change the culture in the home. It can change the culture of an organization. And I think that's very powerful.
no, it's a journey. It's not like I've got everything figured out.
No, I know.
Yeah, but I was just an example with my one boy. He's got it's not a car I would ever have chosen. It's one of those Japanese cars that's off the boat. It's a right-hand drive and expensive to fix and things like that. But he's taken so much responsibility around that because it's his vision, it's his
Right.
car, and he had to get his clutch replaced. Well, I said, well, here, let me check out. Subaru dealers, it's 3,000. A friend of mine close, he's a mechanic, he'll do it for 600. And he comes back and says, Dad, I found somebody who'll do it for 600. Like that's what I want from him. He's taking
Right.
ownership. He's not just accepting my advice, consider it, but make sure that you own
Yeah.
the decision at the end of the day. And what are you willing to spend? And
Right.
so those are all the things that I'm looking for,
Sure.
because that's the same strategy I want him when I'm not around. how are you
Right.
going to take your family forward, your relationships forward?
Yes.
And so I'm looking for those characteristics. And so my natural response was, well, why didn't you listen to me and go to the guy I trust? I said, that's awesome. Like, where did you figure that out? How did
Right.
you get that?
Right.
So I want to honor his decisions. I want to honor his choices because it's his journey. Yeah.
Exactly. Rather than being offended by them.
Yeah, exactly. Boy, was
Yeah,
I ever slow
that's
to the
so
point
good.
on that one.
I learned that the hard way with my youngest daughter. I drove her to school and home every day. I was able, because of my work, I could set my own schedule, and I just felt it was so important to spend that relational time. It was, and so I did. And so anyway, she'd jump in the car and she'd start talking about all her friend drama from the day, and
Yeah,
I was always, I'm the relationship expert, right? So I
yeah,
was
yeah,
giving her advice, and she stopped one day. She just says, "Dad, stop.
yeah,
I'm your daughter. I know what to do.
yeah,
I'm just venting." And so I said, "Well, that's fantastic. From now on, I'm going to ask you if you want, and you can ask me if you want my
yeah,
advice. Otherwise, I'm here to listen and vent." And you know
exactly.
what?
Yeah,
She's now a vice president of a company, and she still calls me and will vent. But I
awesome.
dare not give any advice unless she asks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's amazing. Well, man, that hour went by fast. I so appreciate you. And again, I'm just going to put in the chat here so you'll see it come up in both platforms that we live cast to. Dr. Wayne Hammond's website, which is flourishinglife.com. Now, as I said to you, he has a PDF that's called Strength Based Parenting, the strength based approach to preparing your child to thrive. I love that
yeah,
title. It has got nuggets galore in it, and Dr. Wayne Hammond is offering it to you for free. Just email him at. I'm going to put his because if you see his website here, you will see right there. I'm going to just bring it up. You see his website there. Just put Wayne at flourishinglife.com, and that will be his email. And maybe I'll just put that right into the comments here. Wayne at.
yeah. And just so people know that when they come to our website, a lot of my work lately has been in education, helping teachers to practice this in the classroom and how to nurture
Yeah,
the well-being of students, et cetera, or in community organizations that are working, sometimes with those kids that for whatever reason, life has just not taught them to believe in themselves. And therefore they're making choices that
yeah,
are less than healthy. So,
right.
but yeah, no, it's, when I talk to educators or anybody, I said, the greatest asset you have in the school is not the new computers you just bought. The
Yeah,
greatest asset is your teachers because they have the relationship with the students.
yeah. Whenever I taught the Heroes program, I always started with the greatest. What do you think the greatest value in our in our provinces? And
Yeah,
they would always say oil or business or whatever, and I always say, no, you're the greatest resource.
yeah, yeah,
And it was always got them right away, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
it's so true. We do have to see it that way. Absolutely. It they Young people and our children are our greatest resource. They're our greatest legacy. I'm
Yeah,
learning that now with grandchildren. It's
yeah,
like when I watch my daughter parent my grandkids, I'm so proud of her and her husband. They just do an amazing job, and I think, man, they're doing the strength based approach, let me tell you. And I just really am so proud of them, and it's fun to watch. But it's that legacy,
yeah,
that is being passed on generation to generation. So I just really want to encourage our viewers again, go to flourishinglife.com, and if you have teachers in your circle, if you know of
yeah,
teachers, send them to that website. There's incredible resources on there for teachers, and so make sure you share that. But it's also email him. I put it in the comments again. Email Wayne at flourishinglife.com, and he will send you that strength-based parenting PDF, which I really appreciate, Dr. Wayne. That's such a beautiful gift, and thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your insight and your wisdom. I always enjoy talking to you. I always get something out of it. So this is a real treat for me.
it's an absolute pleasure, Mark. And you've got this amazing ministry, and good for you. That's that's a great
Yeah.
legacy to leave for community and people. So just appreciate you keeping me in the loop.
Yeah, you betcha. We'll have you on again sometime. Maybe we'll talk about other subjects, but this
Yeah.
was so good today, and I really appreciate it. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you for joining us again. Send this out to somebody. If you know that you've got a friend who's struggling as a parent, by all means, send this episode. You can share off of YouTube or off the Relationship Matters Facebook page, and you can share this link with somebody, because it is just golden information here. You got some top level teaching today from Dr. Wayne Hammond, and so be good and pay it forward. Just share it out there, and of course, I always appreciate that as well. So we'll see you next Thursday. We'll have another guest, and we're going to have another great discussion next Thursday. Join us, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you very much.